Well, Sophia, the purpose of this interview is to let your audience know who you are and the person behind the article so they can identify with you to some degree. But first, will you please tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
I received my bachelor's degree from Sam Houston State, and then I received my master's from Texas Tech University in interdisciplinary studies. I currently work for the Museum of Texas Tech University in the Anthropology Division. Although that season is finishing, my contract is ending, we'll see what's in store for the future.
What inspired you to compose such an article?
Well, it was really three instances that led to the culmination of this article. And first was identifying the problem. This was years ago, and I was at Sam Houston State, and there was this debate going on in the mall area. It's a public area. And people were yelling at one another. And someone from the crowd said something that struck a nerve with me. They insinuated that science was the new religion, that science is the one that enlightens. And now that wasn't what was particularly said, but within the context of the situation, that's what they meant to say. And that was the first time I had encountered that worldview. In all my academic time, I'm studying molecules and proteins, and I was dumb to the world around me, to the worldviews around me. And I thought, how in the world do I impact this perspective? How do I change this perspective? And how are youth going to stand against this kind of comment? And it really bothered me. I didn't know how I was going to, I couldn't even articulate the argument, really, so I couldn't find a solution. So I suppressed that memory and moved on. I moved to Lubbock so I could go to Tech, and my mentor from Sam Houston sent me a book. In fact, I he's one of the people I dedicate this article to, Eli Stewart. He sent me a book entitled The Four Trojan Horses of Humanism. Before that time, like I said, I was confused about truth, science, God, how they fit together. My problem was never, does God exist? Or my faith in God was never wavered. That's never been an issue. But I had a struggle with how these things should work together. Should they even go together? After reading this book, it's as if this fog that was over my mind cleared away, and I could see the argument, and I could see the solution, and I thought, man, people need to read this book. Everybody needs to read this book. Or somebody needs to write it in a simpler way where people could understand. That would be really good. Someone else. And then a few years passed, and my mom called me on the phone. She's like, Mija, you know, there's Kindle articles, Kindle books. I think I want to write a Kindle book. And I looked at her and I thought, that's what I have to do.
Wow.
I have to write that article. So that's what kind of led up to me writing this article.
Will you briefly describe to the audience what your article is about?
Try to explain what science is and is not. And I do that by defining terms, the terms evolution, fact, theory, subjective, and objective. And I talk about fact versus value, and I try to weave truth through all of that, and talk a little bit about walls beyond science. So that's basically what my article is about. My target audience is those parents that homeschool their kids, religious people, not even just Christians, but mainly Christians, because that's the perspective I write it from, is for Christians, but religious people as well, teachers that might want to augment their lesson a bit. That's my main target.
Your article does not go into detail about evolutionary mechanisms, but should Christians or religious people be threatened by evolution?
That's a good question. Really, the mechanisms in evolution are mutation, migration, genetic drift, natural selection, and coevolution. And those mechanisms explain why gene frequencies change. And really, religion religious people don't have a problem with small changes over time, like microevolution. Really, the problem is with macroevolution and speciation. Speciation at the macroevolutionary scale. It's small changes over long periods of time that lead to different kinds of species. That's really where religious people have a problem. So religious people can agree with some aspects of evolution while disagreeing with others.
Okay. On the issue, you mentioned speciation. On that issue, most Christians do discount evolution altogether. What needs to happen with this particular aspect so that we or Christians can embrace evolution or some aspects of it?
Really, you need to come to an understanding of what science is and is not, and then look deeply into those things that you might disagree with. That is evolution. If you can, and Berkeley has a really good website explaining evolution. If you just search Evolution 101, a Berkeley website will come up and it explains it simply. It's really understanding the concepts, really educating yourself as what evolution is, what are those mechanisms, what does all this mean? And I think that would help the situation. And I'll list that link at the bottom of this video.
So we don't have to totally dismiss evolution altogether.
Right, we shouldn't. It's disturbing when people put like titles like evolution versus God or evolution versus creationism. Because really, if you think about it, God provided those evolutionary mechanisms for animals and species so they can adapt to the pressures that are put upon the environment, or that come from the environment.
In your article, and I must say this, you're a little direct when speaking about educators attempting to pass their agenda. What do you mean by that?
Well, I've never actually had this problem, particularly in science classes. Ever since my high school science education all the way till my master's, like my last science class for my master's degree, I never had a professor impose their views. What I mean by some professors have personal agendas, some teachers have personal agendas, is when they speak propaganda or they present their worldview as if there is no other. And that is what I mean by, I say that because just this past week, I had a parent tell me that their son was in a class where the teacher was telling the students that they shouldn't be believing in religions. And they brought up Christianity and the fact that, rather, that Christianity is not based on fact. And they were telling that to the class. They were insinuating, they basically made the students feel inferior. That was in a high school, in a science class. It's a big deal.
Right. Educators, i.e. professors, teachers, scientists, biologists, may read your article and find that you categorize them in a way that insults them. What would you say to them?
Well, my intention is not to purposely offend. If a professor or a teacher, any type of educator, parent even, is teaching in a wrong way, then yes, this article would be very offensive. But if you're not, professor, teacher, whomever, if you're not teaching in a negative way, in a way that you shouldn't, then you shouldn't take this article so personally, because you're doing the right thing.
So, talking about educators, teachers, mainly at the high school level, professors usually have more liberty to teach, to go off on tangents and stuff, but mainly in high school, teachers have a set curriculum And it may not include talking about the creation story or how creation started or where it began. And if that's the case, it seems like the system itself has to be changed, correct?
Yes, and I think it can be done in two ways. Adding a religious class, a theology class, or even a philosophical class to the curriculum with this teacher that really imposed their worldview on the students. The students had no other class to go to ask and follow up on what she said. And I think that there's a void there in the curriculum. And even, I read this article where the school system is trying to teach logic and trying to teach students how to conceptualize. So they have reordered math and they've changed the curriculum all up, and it's this much more difficult, intricate way to solve a math problem. And it tells me that there is a void there, that they want students to understand concept, logic, philosophy, but they're messing with the core curriculum and not adding that philosophical class where they could learn that logics class, even the theology class where they could learn that. So I think that would help. And I actually agree that the teacher should have brought it up in a science class. I do agree with that. But there's a problem that she imposed that worldview. Right. The second way I think that the system could change is going back to the educational roots. And that is unity and diversity in the university. And Ravi Zacharias said that best. As educators, you should want to connect the different disciplines together. Why shouldn't you talk about a history in a science class? Or religion in a criminal justice class? Philosophy in an economics class? Ethics in a government class? Why shouldn't you want to do that? We should want to weave those disciplines together in a thicker, thinnest thread you see fit, right? We should want to augment education. And I had a professor tell me, you know, you can't talk about creationism and science in the same sentence. You can't do that. And it really made me think, because he's right, creationism is not scientific, but there's got to be that solution, and that's the answer that came to my mind. That's the solution that came to my mind. We should be wanting to augment all the disciplines, to connect and bridge the disciplines. One of the editors said that, you know, I misunderstand science. And at the time, my article was called Science Misunderstood, and they're sitting there telling me that I don't understand science. And it took a moment where I thought, well, should I even be teaching people about science? I just changed the title to Do I Misunderstand Science? And I changed the section up that he didn't agree with. But Ravi Zacharias says, if you stifle a worldview just because you don't like it, that's not a fair education. Truth will ultimately triumph. If you put God back in the classrooms by way of a class, and you augment education, you bridge the gap, unity and diversity in the university in a fair way, I think that's the way you can solve that problem.
Well, thanks for being here, Sophia.
Hi everyone, thank you for watching my interview about my article, Do I Misunderstand Science? I want to give a special thanks to my brother Jonas for allowing me to film in his studio. All the metal artwork that you see behind me and behind him in the interview are all his pieces. And I will link his Facebook page in the description box below. I do apologize for the editing on this interview. I had to shorten for time, so it does come across choppy, and I apologize for that. But I do thank you for watching, and I will list, or also link rather, my article in the description box below. But again, thank you for watching, and have a good one.